And by taking us through 3 cases, the Birla papers, the Sahara papers, and through Pull's diary, Pull's note, they have actually conclusively demonstrated this nexus between politicians, businessmen, I'm afraid lawyers, judges, and by our silence on many of these issues, they have shown how we are also a part of the same nexus as we are journalists. And that this nexus is at every level, it is in every institution, it is in every region, it cuts across political parties, it cuts across professions. And in that sense, it is really this business of the biblical state, that when the salt of the earth has lost its saltness, with what shall things be salted? That is our problem today. That is why everybody is at the wit's end. कि भी अब किया क्या जाए अगर सारे इस कुएं में हैं. You see, the origin of this whole issue is that by the 1970s, it had become clear that under this Indian socialism had just become Indian patronage, and people could grow in India only by access to the state. And the expectation was that if you freed the people, the hounds would run, there would be faster growth. Second, that there would be regulatory institutions which would be independent and which would keep the people within the bounds of public interest. And the third was that there would be 2 classes which would keep, which would be always the propellers of reform, because they would be, their creativity would be inhibited by a frozen or a lifeless state. And these were the entrepreneurs and the middle class. And as this book shows, and as our experience every day shows, that actually speaking, even today, the entrepreneurs remain in the same mold, that you grow by access to persons in the state. The only exception in the last few years, in the last 2.5 decades, has been the IT sector. As Jaswal knows, that because the state did not notice them, they grew on their own. But otherwise, if you see any of these big business houses, and now the houses which are becoming big, like Ramdev, like this Ravi Shankar, the Adani, all these persons are again because of their access to the state that they are able to grow very fast. And it is in that sense that the book documents so well that the hope of, that the premises underlying reforms have turned out to be wrong. Those were premises of persons like me. Now, the issue, there is a serious issue, and these loose pages is a very fine way to attract our attention to that. You see, even in a bound diary or a bound book, I can use codes, so that if I am taking the money, Mr. Dwivedi is paying the money to Arun Shourie, but he always uses the name of Jaswal. And therefore, and that code of Jaswal means Arun Shourie is actually kept in some safe in Bahamas. So when the documents are discovered, you all say Jaswal has taken the money, but actually it is Arun Shourie who has taken the money. So it was for this reason that in the Jain Hawala case, Karuna will correct me if I am wrong, and a senior advocate will correct me, that it was said that yes, they are evidence, but they are the reasons for further investigation. Now in these cases, as Prashant explained to us, that actually speaking, they were not just sort of vague entries. These were entries which were detailed. Who gave the money, on what date, where, to whom, and so on. And they matched other documents of that particular company. And in the case of Pull, again, it was a dying declaration. therefore, it is a very specific thing that in such and such contract, in such and such irrigation work, in procuring such and such judgment, so much money was paid. Now here was prima facie, you could see, the court could have said, yes, we would like to see whether, let us take 10 random cases, 5 random cases, and see if the facts are borne out. The allegations here are borne out by evidence. But they chose not to do so at all, in contravention of their many previous judgments. And the second thing that comes through in this Sourya and Paranjoy's book is how easily these things are brushed aside. You see, these the cash which is recovered, how do they say, the entries which are there, they are detailed entries. So the person says, sir, this is the entry of, these are these are fabricated papers produced by one employee, disgruntled employee, so as to defame his boss. And everybody seems to accept that, the court seems to accept that. Similarly, the cash, नहीं ये हमारी नहीं, ये इसकी private cash है. ये private cash खुद अपने investments के लिए use कर रहा था. 25 करोड़, 137 करोड़. How can it be? But the courts found it in this way. Then you just transfer the income tax officer is just transferred. Now just see, the same thing happened in the case of Rafael. In the price negotiating committee, they increased the benchmark price by 40% or 50%, I guess. And 3 officers objected. And 1 officer wrote a detailed note on this. And what did they do? They just asked the officer to go on leave. And the person who was a strict officer was just made the secretary of the UPSC and was replaced by another person who facilitated the transition, the course of this note of raising the price without any justification. And she became the youngest member of the UPSC. So you just do this. मगर उसमें मुश्किल ये भी है कि भाई हम लोग, and the book also brings out across professions. It is not just the civil servants, but the role of lawyers in all this. There has not been a scandal in India which has not been facilitated by the chartered accountants and by these very big companies, Price Waterhouse and so on. The Satyam, they were the auditors. All these fellows' books are being audited regularly. And there is not a big criminal who has not been able to get a big lawyer or to silence big journalists. So this is across professions in this way. And unfortunately, it extends up to the judges. They are not, after all, people from heaven. They are from among us. And they accept patently false pleas of all these characters. And they do not use the power that they have, for instance, on perjury. Whether in the Sohrabuddin murder case, I don't know, probably by now, 53 or some people have resigned. Similarly, the obvious evidence in the case of, so many such, okay, how many people have died unnatural deaths, but they don't look at it. So the judges become a part of this whole problem. And I will just say one small thing about the features that come out and then suggest as to what is the one sovereign remedy that we have. And that is, one is the cascading effect of all this. The Purani kahavat hai, Faraz will remind us कि तारीख सिखाती है कि लम्हों ने खता की और सदियों ने सजा पाई. आप एक छोटी चीज करते हो, CBC का एग्जाम्पल दिया गया. His application was well known in the enforcement directorate. And you make him the CBC, and in the next round he is the judge. Today he is the judge on Alok Verma. In effect. So the cancer cells are spread by the doctors themselves by being put from one body into a higher body. And unfortunately, in all this, in a democracy, the only counterweight could have been the media. But unfortunately, we have become a part of the same establishment. And it is not just that we can't go on blaming that, yes, now the big business has entered the media, therefore we don't have freedom. But it is that Marx's phrase that they appear as giants because we are on our knees. That is our problem. We do not use, just as the judges do not use the power of contempt, power of against perjury to curb it, we in journalism do not use the power that we can still use. I don't think any owner would have stopped us from analyzing the defense budget in detail. But you show me the last analysis in the mainline papers, other than Ajay Shukla and others, a few persons who do just an analysis of the defense budget. We just don't do it. So, and that is why, that's my final point, the delusion that we suffer from, that one person will save us from another person, that Mrs. Gandhi Sanjay Gandhi को रोकेगी, नरेंद्र मोदी अमित शाह को रोकेगा, राजनाथ सिंह बेचारा मजबूर राजपूत वो नरेंद्र मोदी को रोकेगा, भाई सुषमा क्या कर रही है? But no, yeah, one institution will save us from the dictatorial tendencies of a ruler. But the fact of the matter is that that institution has been subjected to the same processes of rot, which have enabled or which have facilitated or propelled the dictatorial ruler to acquire those powers at the top. This is our problem. And that is why I find that the solution always, in such matters, has to come from outside. It has to come from individuals. And it has to come from, if I may use an old phrase, I had written about it almost 30 years ago, from marginal men. Atosh is here. When Mr. KPS Gill was made in charge of the Punjab police, the fact is that there was no Punjab police. It had evaporated. He started the fight as an individual by mobilizing individuals. And then a force came up. There was no judiciary. In the same way, this fight against the way the things have become now has to come from individuals, and it can only come from the marginal individuals. Because if you are very big in this particular system, then naturally you are a part of that system. That's why you are big in the particular system. And Paranjoy's work, Shourya's work, the work of Prashant, Bhushan, the work of Common Cause, this shows that actually speaking, one individual, a small band, can make a difference. That is the great hope that we have to rest on, and even if it doesn't come true, there is never any success or failure in this matter. I'll give you one example and then just come to two precautions which I think the marginal men should take. The example is of what Gandhiji said in Champaran. You see, as you remember, the condition of indigo cultivators had become very poor, and there was a satyagraha, and he would always pitch his demand at the minimum. His demand was, set up a committee, please set up a committee to examine the condition of the indigo cultivators. Now just see, there is no failure in that. Why? Because if the British government sets up a committee, then you have bent the British Empire, the poor peasants have bent the British Empire. And if it does not set up the committee, then your point is proven. कि अरे भाई वो कमिटी भी नहीं बनाएंगे तो तुम उनको क्या माई बाप समझते हो? Similarly, if books like Shourie and Paranjoy's book have an effect, wonderful. If they don't have an effect, they hold a mirror to us about the stage to which our country has reached. That itself is a very great service. So I think it has to come from marginal men, and there is no success or failure in their effort. But I would suggest two very small suggestions. There are two prerequisites of this kind of work. One is that one must be absolutely truthful. Because if we, even by error, make a small mistake, or if we twist even one fact, the chaps who are inconvenienced by our disclosure will latch on to that fact and destroy our entire credibility. And the second is that we should all be a little humble. Because one thing that happens when you take up such work is that you start feeling, अरे सारे ही साले वो चोर हैं, सिर्फ मैं honest हूँ. That is not the case. And I am very glad that in this particular book, I say this because I come in for some sort of politely marginal, what you call censure at one point myself in the particular book. So I say this, that it is a wonderful thing that in this book, Sourya and Paranjoy have stuck to the facts. Every single paragraph has been well documented. It is based on the documents that nobody can deny, and therefore they have done a great service to journalism and to all of us. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.